Hey guys, in this month's Historical Fiction 101, I'm going to be talking about historical fiction cover designs. Like any genre in literature, you can usually tell what type of genre you're going to get into based off of the cover alone. So how do you know if you're about to pick up a historical fiction novel? What are the dead giveaways to let you know that, hey, this takes place in such and such time from long ago? And just before I get going and sharing some of these covers, just a warning, I kind of am very limited with my historical fiction. I primarily read from like the Plantagenet era, the Tudor era, the Romanov era, the World War II. So yeah, I don't have like every single era in history. So not every single era is going to be represented in this video for cover designs, but still, it can all still apply in the same sort of way. One of the first dead giveaways when you're looking at a historical fiction cover is the fact that usually there are people dressed in period piece clothing. Like on this book, The Last Summer by Judith Kinghorn, you have a woman dressed in 1940s period clothing. In The Dressmaker by Kate Alcott, you have a woman on the cover dressed in early 1900s clothing. And then on the other Boleyn Girl cover by Philippa Gregory, you have a woman dressed in 1500s sort of clothing. Another giveaway that you're about to read something that belongs in the historical fiction genre, you will either find maybe a portrait or a photo of a person on the cover. Like on Target Churchill by Warren Adler, underneath the writing you can see a photo, a black and white photo of Churchill. And then on this cover from The Tsarina's Daughter by Carolee Erickson, we have a black and white image of Grand Duchess Tatiana Romanov. And then on this cover, Blood and Beauty by Sarah Dinot, we have very classic portraits made of Cesare and Lucrezia Borgia. These are some of their most popular paintings of them, so yeah, usually when you're about to read something from the Borgia era, these paintings will a lot of times be on the cover. So what if you like historical fiction in the fantasy genre? That's usually a fairly easy one to kind of distinguish too, compared to if you're maybe reading just a plain out fantasy set off in a whole different world, like Game of Thrones or something. Most historical fiction fantasy, it takes place in kind of the Victorian era. That's usually considered steampunk. There are other areas of history that the fantasy genre does explore, but for some reason fantasy really loves the Victorian era. So you have something like the Parasol Protectorate series by Gail Carriger, where you see a woman in period piece clothing, but when you look at the finer details, you can see that things are a bit anachronistic for the time period. Like, she clearly has some sort of mechanical umbrella, which would not have existed at the time. And then you have Cassandra Clare's The Infernal Devices trilogy, which also takes place during Victorian London. And you have a male character dressed in Victorian period clothes. But then when you look at the finer details, yeah, you see mechanical looking clocks. And then this little clockwork angel thing here that's pretty important to the story. But what about if you're a fan of military historical fiction? Military historical fiction is something that I've not really gotten into. I think maybe I've only read one or two books from that genre. You can usually tell when you're about to pick up that genre because when you look at the cover, you can see things like swords or helmets or scenes of battles or maybe even ships. You'll even see stuff like crowns for like kings and whatnot. And then moving on over to young adult historical fiction, you can usually tell when you're about to read a young adult historical novel because the covers are very vibrant, they're very colorful, very pretty, purposely doing so to catch the eye of female readers, I think. And a lot of times on young adult historical covers, the clothing is not entirely accurate. They try to make it accurate, but they kind of adjust the clothing to appeal to a modern teenage girl. And then what if you love historical romance? Historical romance, I've not really read any historical romance. I tend to just read general historical fiction. But historical romance, you can usually tell when you're about to get into that because you'll have a man and woman dressed in period piece, but the man might have his shirt open or a shirt missing, or the woman, she's dressed in a corset, or she has some of her bodice kind of coming down in a scantily clad manner. So that's the primary examples of historical fiction covers that I could come up with. I have a feeling I'm leaving out a few different sorts of designs, but for the most part those are the big ones that I see. Like I said, you'll either find people dressed in period piece, you'll find people, their portraits. You'll also see things, like I said, that might have something to do with swords and crowns and armor and ships and battles and whatnot. So yeah, historical fiction I think is a relatively easy genre that you can tell you're about to pick up that sort of book. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. In the comments below, feel free to share with me any additional covers, any additional examples, and I'll be sure to go check those out. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you liked this historical fiction 101, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.